For a long time, people believed that if they could just choose the right economic idea, history would finally calm down. That once the correct system was installed, prosperity would follow naturally, conflict would fade, and society would run the way it was supposed to. This belief itself is one of the most powerful myths of the modern age, because what history actually shows is something quieter and more unsettling. Systems don't fail because they are misunderstood. They fail because they collide with human behavior under pressure. Long before anyone argued about markets or planning, wealth was not something you earned so much as something you inherited or seized. Power flowed downward from crowns, armies, and land ownership. Most people live their entire lives producing value they would never control. The economy, if it could even be called that, was static. Generation after generation repeated the same labor with the same tools, hoping only that next year wouldn't be worse than the last. Progress wasn't blocked by bad ideas. It was blocked by the absence of incentives and the concentration of authority. When machines entered the picture, everything fractured at once. Industrialization didn't just increase production, it rewired expectations. Suddenly output could grow faster than population. Risk-taking mattered. Ownership could expand beyond aristocracy. Capital began to move independently of bloodlines. This new order rewarded those who could organize labor, manage machines, and deploy money efficiently. It also punished those who had nothing but their bodies to sell. The factory didn't care about tradition or dignity. It cared about output. And for the first time, entire societies experienced growth and suffering at the same time. Out of that contradiction emerged the great ideological promise. One side argued that private ownership and competition would eventually lift everyone, even if the path was uneven. The other insisted that leaving distribution to markets would always produce hierarchy, exploitation, and instability. Both were partly right, and both ignored something crucial. Neither asked what happens when real people, with fear, ambition, loyalty, and self-interest, begin navigating the system day after day. When states tried to replace markets entirely, they discovered a problem that had nothing to do with morality. Information stopped flowing, without prices shaped by millions of decisions. Planners were guessing in the dark. Targets replaced feedback. Compliance replaced creativity. The system could mobilize resources during emergencies, but it struggled to evolve during normal life. Over time, the promise of equality hardened into control, and control concentrated power in ways that were invisible until they were suffocating. But when markets were left to run without restraint, a different distortion appeared. Wealth began to accumulate faster than accountability. Success fed on itself. Financial structures grew more complex than the societies meant to oversee them. Risk became abstract, distributed through instruments few understood. When failures arrived, they didn't stay local, they cascaded. And ordinary people, who had no voice in the decisions, absorbed the consequences. What makes this history uncomfortable is that collapse didn't arrive because one side was evil and the other virtuous. It arrived because incentives were misaligned with reality. Systems rewarded behaviors that worked in the short term and punished those that protected the long term. In centrally planned economies, loyalty mattered more than truth. In market-driven ones, returns mattered more than resilience. Each system amplified a different human weakness. Over time, societies adjusted not because ideology softened, but because survival demanded it. States added protections where markets broke trust. Markets were reintroduced where planning strangled initiative. The result was not purity, but compromise. Mixed systems emerged everywhere, shaped less by theory and more by accumulated scars. What we now call modern economies are not designed. They are negotiated settlements between competing forms of power. This is why debates about capitalism versus socialism are a truly end. They aren't arguments about efficiency. They're arguments about control. Who decides what matters? Who absorbs risk? Who benefits when things go right and who pays when they go wrong? Labels change, but the tension remains. Technology evolves, finance accelerates, institutions grow larger, yet the underlying struggle is the same. The future will not resolve this by choosing a side. New pressures will force new trade-offs. Automation will challenge labor incentives. Aging populations will strain redistribution. Environmental limits will test growth itself. Systems that cannot adapt will fracture, regardless of what they call themselves. The lesson history keeps offering is not ideological. It's structural. Power must be constrained. Incentives must reflect reality, and trust, once broken, is expensive to rebuild. Money is never just money. It is a signal of what a society values and who it protects. When you understand that, the old arguments sound different, less like philosophy, more like warnings. If you want more stories that look beneath the surface of money, power, and history, consider subscribing and continue this exploration with me.